We need a word. We need a word. If we're going to pass from death to life, we need a word. We need a word. We need a word. If we're going to pass from death to life, we need a word. If we're going to pass from death to life, we need a word. If we're going to pass from death to life, we need a word. So hear this word from the 14th chapter of Exodus, the first 4 verses. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon. You shall encamp opposite by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them. I, meaning God, saying, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, so that I will gain the glory, meaning God, for myself over Pharaoh and all his armies. And the Egyptians shall know that I am God." And they, meaning the Israelites, did what God said. I want to ask a question that comes from Pharaoh's assessment of what was going on with the children who were on their way in freedom. I want to ask you a question today that applies to us. Are we wandering aimlessly? As we make our way through this Exodus story, we discovered last week that this was not the road to freedom, but the road of freedom. And let me remind you again today, by the mercies of God, that you are already free. For the one who Christ has set free is free indeed. I guess that is why some people who really have an authentic rescue of God, a deliverance, a salvation episode, a conversion, I guess that is why sometimes after having that and experiencing for a little while the joy of that, they flutter off because they expect God to save them from everything. And there are some things that you and I cannot expect God to save us from because we've acted our way into it. This little story here is the setup for the next few weeks and what happens after Pharaoh makes this assessment, a wrong assessment of the people of God. Now, we have some words here, and I want to tell you, dear friends, when you come particularly to Hebrew texts and you see big words that you can't pronounce, don't just skip over them. Look them up. Because what the Israelites were good at doing is assigning meaning to mundane things, ordinary things like the birth of children and naming them. Here's a piece from Hosea where Hosea is married to, now I don't want to get into all this, married to someone who has had a life as a sex worker. We'll talk about, I'll open that up a little more later, but right now, but they had 3 children. One child's name means not my child. Another one, his name means my child. And the third one, we not sure. It was an allegory to the way in which God understood the people of Israel. There were some people there who were definitely his children. There are some in Israel and in the church who definitely ain't God's children. And there's some that with the right push could be either way. Come on, somebody. They didn't waste these words, so we come to these big words to camp in front of Hahiroth, between Migdol and Baal Zephon. These are big words. I'm going to give you the key to this, so when we get to that part of the story, you will understand it. Hahiroth was a temple site. We are not clear whether or not it was, well, it couldn't have been yet a temple for the Israelites because they hadn't started their temple life yet. So it was a temple of some unknown God that is no longer working. It's empty. Stay with me. Migdol was a tower. That's what it translates into. Stay there between that abandoned temple site and this tower, which could be, as a tower, it is a symbol of achievement and power and success, like the Tower of Babel. And then they were to be surrounded in this area, going back and forth. There's this other place, Baal Zephon, which is the home of the Canaanite storm god. I just want you to get those. An abandoned temple, a symbol of power, and the home of the god of storms. The Israelites were told to make their camp there. Friends, have you ever been in that place where you've said, I'm being between a rock and a hard place? Right? Or, which might be a political observation today, between the devil and a deep blue sea. The Greeks had first the sirens, who had such beautiful voices that when the sailors passed through the narrow strait, that their voices were so alluring that the sailors heard their song and they crashed their boat into the land. Some of us are somewhere between beautiful songs and the seduction to self-destruct. They had another, the Greeks talked about Scylla and Charybdis. The sailors, these were two, well, somebody called them two monsters, but they weren't really monsters. One was a monster. One was a six-headed monster. When the sailors came through, they would snatch them off the boat with those six heads and eat them. The other was a whirlpool, and it would suck the boat into and crash. And you'll hear somebody say, who knows this, they'll say, I'm between Scylla and Charybdis. The problem is, dear friends, that we are not just troubled on two sides. See, the binaries don't work because there's more than that. We are troubled, as Paul would say, on every side. That the complexity of our struggle is deeper than making decisions between this or that. You don't believe me? Come on into this text now. I'll explain that to you. Let me show you something. Pharaoh says, and listen, God says that Pharaoh would say of the Israelites, they're wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them. Pharaoh's vantage point from his place of privilege and assumed power says, I think I got them now. They are between a monument to an old god that is now empty, meaning that that God may have been impotent as far as Pharaoh was concerned. And they were in front of a tower of success and power, and they were in a place that used to be the home of the Canaanite god, and on the other side of them is the sea. I got them. Are we wandering aimlessly? Maybe it is that where we are right now makes us feel like we are. Remember, we are following the contour of the sea. And I've never seen a sea that had a straight coast for a long time. It is filled with turns and bends and jaggedness. That is the way. Keep the sea to yourself. Let me give you a little something. I learned this when I first came here doing funerals in Evergreen Cemetery here in Brooklyn. If you're ever in Evergreen Cemetery and you try to get out because you know they are meandering, you can get stuck in there. Here's a tip from your pastor. Keep the fence on your left and you'll find your way out. Just keep driving. Is that right? All right. Just keep the fence on your left. You might make a turn or two, but if you look for the fence, you will come to the gate. Pharaoh, mind you, these words about wandering aimlessly is what God says Pharaoh will think. Listen, y'all, that should be a clue to you that it is misinformation. The coastline of the sea meanders and it crooks and bends, and what feels to you like a straight line is really not. Let me give you something else. If you're ever driving in a car coming across the Turnpike extension into Holland Tunnel, you got me? Okay, I want you to pay attention to the New York skyline as you're doing that. At first, when you come across the bridge over by Newark Airport and you go down, at first it's off in the distance and you sight it. And before you get to the entrance of the Holland Tunnel, that skyline has moved in your vision from way over here to right there. Sometimes it's on your left, but you keep driving. And because your road bends, it will appear on your right. Friends, when your road bends, keep your eye on your destination. When your road is bending, when the curves come, when the detour comes, sight your destination. And you may not get there directly, but you just wiggle your way, meander your way, wander your way to it, because that destination is secure. Keep driving, keep walking, keep moving. Those monuments do not move our opportunity to see that our perspective changes. They are wandering aimlessly, he says. No, they're just keeping their sight on the destination. Second thing he says is the wilderness is now closing in on them. In other words, they're running out of land. Have you ever been there where your options continue to shrink and you don't have much more real estate to play with, and you're sitting there about to go headlong into water, and maybe you can swim, but you don't want to mess up your hairdo. My father would never go on a cruise. He had a simple reason. He said, I can't drink all that water. The wilderness is growing. They're running out of land. They're painted into a corner. Did you not know that the Sahara Desert has grown 10% since 1920? Some of that is due to natural climate change, and other parts of that, dear friends, is due to something that folks in power want to deny, and that is global warming. The problem is, as the wilderness grows, the people who live there suffer social, economic, and environmental issues. People cannot plant their crops anymore, grow produce for and feed themselves, or supply food for others. The livestock cannot live when the wilderness grows. And then God says, then I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. Okay, this is tough, but you should no longer be people who only drink milk. I know there are some people who will say, see, I told you God had a plan for everything. And I know there's some people who say, wait a minute. Why would God harden Pharaoh's heart? Because some of us right now are going through some things and the world is against us, and we're saying, I don't know why God would do this to me. Listen, in the ancient Israel theological cosmos, everything that happened ultimately, because we're going to see in a few chapters that God is going to say, I am God, I'm a jealous God, I don't want anybody to have anything to do, and that the Israel people would say in Deuteronomy, Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one God. See, there could only be one God in their concept. And that meant that God was ultimately responsible for everything that happened. So writing back on this, they say God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Now, we can talk about that in Bible study on Wednesday. But what's happening here is God has put them between that old abandoned place, temple that nobody used anymore, and the place of where the power and acquisition in the tower, and then the third place in the Canaan, the place where the old god of Canaan was there. That was his home base, and bordered by the sea. And God tells them to move around in there a little bit. Listen to what I'm about to tell you. Until we get to where we should be, we got to make sure that we keep moving, because if we just do nothing, we're an easy target. I know some of us are saying right now, I don't know what to do. Let me say to you, do something. You don't want to do the things that people are saying we should do together. You ought to do something. And you ought to do something that we can do together, so you are not and I am not by myself. So we have to create new spaces of things to do with each other. But listen what I'm about to say. That God hardened Pharaoh's heart is connected to the fact that God knew what button to push for Pharaoh, and that the people would seem to be vulnerable, and then he would follow them. Every day he thought about it. How am I going to make their life more miserable? Every day. Something else. I'm going to go on record and saying something. I said I wasn't going to say it, but just recently, a prestigious college in this metropolitan area had some of its money, federal funds, withdrawn because some of their students don't feel safe there. If that's the case, then we ought to take federal funding from every college. Not just the college, the university. Not just the university where you're trying to build a tower, a casino in the desert. That's where the fallacy of all this stuff about anti-DEI and all that is just crazy. Because if it's discrimination you want to stop, you have to stop all discrimination, not just some selected. And Pharaoh started thinking about it. After all I've done for them, I gave them 3 meals a day. I kept them good. I let them, after we had wiped out a generation. I've let them start making babies again and all this stuff. I've been good to them, and what they want to do is leave me. I'm going after them. Now, this is the part, I'm almost done, but this is the part where I don't want everybody to hear everything that I'm going to say. So I'm going to tell you to do some homework, and then we can discuss it later, okay? Because I don't know who's listening. I don't care at one part, but here is the thing I'm trying to tell you. Everything that God is doing for you, you don't need everybody to know. Huh? So I want you to go look up Brer Rabbit. And before the Eurocentric writers got a hold to it, I want you to see, that's your homework assignment. Look up Brer Rabbit, B-R-E-R, rabbit. Brer is an Africanized, it is an older expression of the word you and I now use, bruh. Brer, bruh. Brother Rabbit. I also thought about this. I also thought about it has been popularized in a cartoon character from Warner Brothers by the name of Bugs Bunny. But you don't want to look at the newer Bugs Bunnies. You want to go back and see some of them, the older ones. In our culture, we have always had what would be known as the trickster figure, meaning people who did not have a lot of earthly power, but they had sense. Here's the punchline you're going to come to. Brother Fox been trying to wear out and catch and kill Brer Rabbit. And Brer Rabbit said, you can throw me in the sea, man, do whatever you want to do, but whatever you do, don't throw me over in that briar patch. If that's too old for you to go back to, then I want you to watch a particular scene in the movie Ray, where he's negotiating his ownership and salary for his work. And he starts talking, and the guy says, well, so-and-so and so, and then Ray says, you know, they start low and they get to the place that Ray wants it, and he said, man, that's what you were trying to do to me all along. He said, well, they call that country dumb. I want you to remember, wherever you are on your destination, you have a moral responsibility, says Martin King, to be intelligent. And you cannot outpower all the people who are against you. You do not have all the stuff they have, but you got something that they can't take away from you. And that is your ability to outthink them. That's all I can say in public today.